Hi Year 3! This is a new special video that we are doing to help with your home learning each week. Sometimes the video will link with the home learning that you have a paper copy of, and sometimes it will be a video that's linked to something we've been learning in class, and you can watch it for an extra bit of reinforcement and practice to help at home. So this week we are going to start with some maths. This week in maths we have been focusing on representing three-digit numbers in lots of different ways. So we've been thinking about hundreds, tens and ones. So we are going to look at the number 442 to start with today. So I want you to start thinking how many hundreds, how many tens and how many ones there are in that number. Think about a way that you could represent that number. It's written in numerals, so you might start thinking about how you could show it with a picture or write it in words. Here are some examples. One way you might show this number is through a place value grid like the one above, and use counters or circles to represent the counters to show 4 hundreds, 4 tens and 2 ones. In a very similar way, we've got the place value counters, which are represented here with circles to show there are 400 circles, 4 tens and 2 ones, representing the same number. You may decide that a way to represent it is to practice writing that number in words, so that is another way to show it. You might think I'm going to try and show it on a number line, so using a number line that looks a bit like this, try to estimate roughly where 442 would be placed on that number line. Sometimes people find that a bit tricky, so that's one to practice. This is some special equipment we often use in maths. Sometimes it's called base 10, sometimes it's called deans, sometimes we just say hundreds, tens and ones. So the hundreds are represented by those big blocks where there's 100 tiny cubes. The tens are like sticks with 10 in them, and then the cubes are just individual. So that's the same number that's been represented all those other times. You might decide to show the number through some partitioning, which means breaking the number up into different parts. We've got 440 add 2, but then an alternative way to show that is by splitting the 100 up into 300 and 100, adding 30 and 10 and 2. So by splitting that those hundreds and those tens up even more. The example at the bottom says 400 add 10, add 10, add 20, add 1, add 1. So breaking up those tens and ones a bit more. I expect you could probably find more ways to do that sort of one. I'd like you to think about the ways you've just seen here and have a go at doing it, and maybe a poster or just a page in your book for 684. Try and find at least 4 different ways to represent that number, and if you'd like to do more, or you think you might need some practice, try 740 and maybe even try 502. In spelling this week, we have been focusing on, one of the things we've been focusing on anyway, is adding suffixes to some root words that end with a Y. And when we add these endings to the words, we can't just keep the Y all the time, so we are learning about a special rule. The rules are that when we add ing to a word, we keep the Y. But when we add ed, er and est, we change the Y to an I. This is an example of that. So we have got the word funny. We can't actually add ing to funny because funnying doesn't really make sense. Funny plus the ed, funnied, that also isn't a word. But we can add er to make the word funnier, and you will notice that the Y has changed to an I. You can also add est to make the word funniest, and once again the Y has been changed to an I. With the next example of worry, worry has a Y at the end, like the other words, but we are going to add the ing and keep the Y for worrying. If we didn't, we wouldn't have that nice e-ing at the end. We would just have worrying, and that wouldn't be the same word. For worried, we do take the Y off and add an ed. We do take the Y off, add an I, and then add the ed. So worried has an I, and warrior also has that same pattern where we take off the Y, change it to an I, and add the suffix. I'd like you to have a go at doing this for the other example words. We've got heavy, lazy, marry, hurry, lucky, and carry. Try and add the suffixes to each of those words, but only put words into the grid if they are real words. I wonder if you can find any more words that you can try and do this with that perhaps have a similar rule. Good luck.